I would like to introduce our Congressman Ross Spano, Congressional District 15. Ross will be joining us tonight and giving us some words of wisdom and his thoughts on the campaign and what he sees it will be critical for the 2020 election. So Ross, welcome. Appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight.
Hey, Jim. It is good to be with you, man. I appreciate you and appreciate all of the REC members on the call, and thanks to David and Alex and the work that you're doing with the President's campaign. It's an honor to be with you. I'm grateful to have a chance to talk to you. Every now and then when I'm in Washington over the last year and a half, I'll be in D.C. and I'll see on my calendar the REC meetings, and I'll feel bad that I'm not able to be there. But unfortunately, I have been in D.C. Most of the weeks when you all have met over the last year and a half. But it's good to be with you tonight and just to share a little bit with you about kind of what I see as the lay of the land as we move forward here this next 2 or 3 months. And obviously I don't have to tell anybody how important and critical this election is for the future of our nation. Every year, or I should say every presidential election cycle, it seems that we hear the same mantra, and that mantra is this is the most important election in the history of our nation or in the history of our lifetime. And maybe it feels that way every time, but I just can't help but think that this is actually the cycle when we are dealing with the most important presidential election in the history of our nation. I don't think that there can be two more divergent views and opinions about the way forward. We have one party who is, it seems, willing to vocally begin touting and advocating that we actually move away from the founding and fundamental principles of our nation. And we certainly want to maintain and stay true to those principles. And so we're fighting for the very heart and soul of our nation. And so there's a lot to fight for. When you look at, you look at whether it's, whether we're talking about the right to life and the divergent views that we hold on that issue. As far as the Democrats are concerned, they would like to relentlessly attack life, to essentially create an environment where we're killing babies or allowing them to die after botched abortions. We're funding abortions on demand really as a form of birth control, as opposed to our position, which is to want to create a culture of life, that encourages families to bring life into the world and protects life from conception to the last dying breath. Those are pretty two different opinions about the value of life, whether you're talking about the appointment of Supreme Court justices and federal justices to the bench, to the district and circuit courts. You have one party who seeks the appointment of really activist judges who seek to legislate from the bench, as opposed to our position, which is the nomination and the confirmation of judges who seek and understand what their proper role is, which is to interpret the law and not make it. And so those are two very divergent opinions. You have differences as it relates to whether or not we're going to see a continued relentless attack on fundamental rights, fundamental liberties that we have typically valued in the history of our nation, including rights under the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, and freedom of speech and religious liberty, or from our standpoint, what we think is right to be the sound and solid protection and recognition and even celebration of those fundamental rights. That's a pretty divergent opinion about fundamental liberties. We have a choice about whether or not we're going to have open borders and sanctuary cities, and we're going to defund law enforcement and have more crime, or from our perspective, are we going to have secure borders? Are we going to have the rule of law? Are we going to support our law enforcement and our first responders? Are we going to give them the resources that they need to continue to provide us the safe neighborhoods and the safe communities that we need to run successful businesses and to have successful have safe neighborhoods. So you talk about all of these things, and they're really fundamental divergent views. One of my favorite quotes of all time, I'm reading the biography of Frederick Douglass right now, and one of my favorite quotes from that he gave was, it says, those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. And I'll say that one more time. He said that those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. So we are at a crucible moment in the history of our nation. We're at a fork in the road. We're going to either go one direction or another. And so this is going to be probably the most important 2 or 3 month period in the history of our nation leading up to this next election cycle. So I would just encourage you. I know you all are on this call because you understand the importance of this next election, but I want to encourage you to dig deep. I want to encourage you to give it everything you've got. And when you think you can't give anything else, I want you to give more. When you're tired and you don't want to knock on another door and you don't want to make another call, I want to encourage you to keep knocking and keep dialing and keep moving forward. Perseverance in the face of difficulty and fatigue and seeming maybe even loss sometimes is what is the secret between success and failure. And so I'm optimistic. I think the president has a great team around him. And I think although we've heard a lot from the loud minority of people in this nation over the last several months, certainly, I think we're going to hear a resounding voice of the silent majority in the election coming up. And so I just want to thank each one of you for being engaged. Get your friends and your family engaged. Let's create a buzz. Let's help our president. Let's be vocal. Let's certainly be respectful, but let's be vocal and unashamed of what we believe and why we believe that we have the proper answers for the way forward for our nation. We have, I say it often, but I'll say it again, there have been many generations before us in the history of our nation, and maybe the most important of which were the generation that actually fought for our freedom, the revolutionary generation. And we have something that is different from every other nation in the world, in the world's history, and that is the idea and the experiment that men can govern themselves. And so God forbid that we would be that first generation that would step away and walk away from those fundamental principles that have really served us well for so many generations. So I'm going to fight, and I know you will fight, and I'm confident that we're going to win. I do have, as many of you probably know, I have a primary, and then an individual has filed to run against me. So I would ask for your support. I have fought vehemently in support of the president since the very moment I took office. I have fought in the well of the House. I've spoken out for him. I was one of the few members that went down to the SCIF and stormed the SCIF during the middle of the scam impeachment proceedings that Adam Schiff was leading. And if you're interested, I can share with you the detail of that story, which is quite interesting. But I've put my neck out on the line for the president, and I will continue to do that unashamedly. I've unashamedly fought for life. I have a 100% rating from the National Right to Life, and I have their endorsement. I've fought unashamedly for the right to bear arms, and I will have the NRA's endorsement. I've fought unashamedly for the family, and I'll have the Family Research Council's endorsement. I do have the support and endorsement of the folks in leadership. We have the endorsement of Senator Marco Rubio, the endorsement of Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise, and also Liz Cheney and many others that will be rolling out in the days to come. Been honored to serve you, and I hope that you'll allow me to continue to fight with you to preserve the American way of life for ourselves, but also for our children and our grandchildren. And certainly willing to answer any questions, Jim, if there are any out there.
Well, Ross, would love to hear just a few minutes of your story about in the SCIF. Everybody sitting here is anxious to hear at least a little bit of it. Please share.
Okay, all right. So you probably heard on the news, I can't even remember when it was, maybe it was October, November, something like that. The sham impeachment process had been underway for a couple of months at least. Secret hearings, meetings were taking place in this secure room in kind of the belly of underneath the Capitol. And rank and file members of the House of Representatives, elected members of Congress, were not permitted and were not privy to these meetings. We were not permitted to view the deposition transcripts of individuals that were being deposed there. Even the Republican members on that Intel committee were not given the information as to who would be deposed until the morning of the meeting. So they did not have an opportunity to prepare. Our staff was not given information about who was being deposed. So we had no idea who we were going to be questioning or cross-examining. We couldn't prepare. It was a complete surprise. The President's counsel, as you all know and heard, was not allowed to cross-examine the witness. And so it was an absolute sham of a process, and we had had enough of it. We were going to be given, we felt, and it ultimately did occur, we were going to be given articles of impeachment that we were going to be asked to vote up or down on with respect to the impeachment of the president, which is the, other than going to war, that's probably the second most important vote that you would ever take. And yet we were not allowed access to the information from which we would be given the ability to make that decision. And so we had had enough. We were tired of it. We were frustrated. The American people were frustrated. Our constituents, some of you were reaching out to me and saying, what the heck are you doing? Why aren't you fighting? What is going on up there in Washington? So we held a news conference down there, a couple dozen of us, and then we said, well, why don't we're going to walk over to the SCIF and walk in. So we got over to the door, and there were a couple of Capitol Police officers there, and there was an administrator there, and they said, I'm sorry, we cannot let you in. And we stood there, and we started chanting, we want in, we want in, we want in. It was quite exciting, actually. And so we said, well, who is preventing us from getting in? Go get them and bring them out. So she walked back. I don't know who she talked to, if anybody. But then she came back out, and she said, I can't let you in, I can't let you in. Well, somebody on the committee happened to walk through the door where we were standing, and we just walked in. And the Capitol Police certainly not going to lay their hands on a member of Congress. We walked in. There was a room that is probably maybe 15 feet by 25 feet, a very small room with a small conference desk in the middle of it. There were probably 3 or 4 members of Congress there. The rest of the people around that table were attorneys. And Adam Schiff was at one end, and the deponent, who was a Department of Defense witness, was at the one end. We walked and filtered around the edge of the room, stood. There was no place to sit, but we stood. And Adam Schiff's eyes got as wide as saucers. And we didn't say a word. We just said, we're not going to say anything. We just want to hear. We want to know what is going on. Adam Schiff grabbed the witness and stormed out. And there was an ensuing conversation with a couple of members of our party and a few of their members who were there, which got a little bit heated. They then got up and walked out, and we said we're not leaving leaving anytime soon. Jim Jordan walked back in, who happened to be on Intel. He had a message from Adam Schiff for us, and he said, Adam Schiff, if you don't leave the room, Adam Schiff is going to file ethics complaints against each one of you. So we looked at each other around the room, and we said, have at it. File your ethics complaint. He walked out and told Schiff. Well, I guess Schiff was upset. He stewed maybe for another hour or so. We didn't go anywhere. Then this is kind of an interesting story here. So, you have to give up your phone. You can't take a cell phone into the SCIF. And so we were sitting there, and security came in. They pointed at us, and they said, one of you has your cell phones. We said, no, we assure you we gave our cell phones up. They said, no, we're detecting a phone in this room. One of you has a cell phone. We're like, we don't have a phone. So come to find out, 5 minutes later, we hear buzzing from a cell phone. And the phone is coming from a purse on the table in the SCIF. And the purse is Val Deming's purse, who's a Democratic member. She's from here in Florida. She had her phone in her purse in the secure SCIF. It was her phone. It was not one of our phones. and we were accused of having it. She had got up and left, but left her purse there with her phone in it. I don't know whether she was recording the proceeding. I don't know whether she was using that phone then maybe to leak some of that information. I have no idea. But all I know is then security came in, scurried in, grabbed the purse, and left. Well, then about an hour later, Jim Jordan comes back in. He says, all right, so now Schiff wants to offer a colloquy. Colloquy is basically just a conversation. He's willing to sit across the table from you. You express your opinions. He'll express his opinions, and we'll all feel better, and we'll walk out. We said, is the press going to be permitted in? And he said, no, the press will not be permitted. And we said, well, pound sand, because we want the press and the American people to know what is going on down here. So we stayed there another half hour. Someone ordered pizza in. We had pizza in the secure skiff. We ate lunch down there. Long story short, we were going to stay there. There was a series of votes, inconsequential votes, on the floor of the House later that afternoon. We were going to miss those votes. We were going to stay there all night if we had to. But the Dems, what they did was they took a very important bill on funding for rape kits, and they put that bill on the agenda that had not been there earlier. And we looked at each other and we said, we cannot miss a vote on a rape kit funding bill. So at about 3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon, we left and we went to the floor to vote on that bill. And when we got to the floor, the Democrats pulled that bill off of the agenda. But they now had the secure skiff back again. So, but the next morning, they did announce that they were going to ease some of the rules. They weren't really eased to our satisfaction. But in any event, that whole process was a sham from the very beginning, and the American people knew it. And of course, now we know it from our own experience. So, but anyway, that's kind of what went down. And we're sitting there. I'm looking at other members who were sitting there with me, and was there with Matt Gates and a couple of other members from Florida, just looking at each other and said, this is a pretty historic deal to be able to say that we stood up and fought for what was right in the context of this sham impeachment, and to stood up for the president. So I'm glad I did it. We took some heat for it. We were said that we were a bad example, being civilly disobedient, a bad example for this generation. But I think it was actually a good example. And so, anyways, that's the shorter or maybe longer story of the storming of the skiff.
Thanks, Ross. At this time, we're going to do questions and answers, and I'll let Michael moderate that since he has at the control of the computer. I just want to make one caveat. You use the term skiff multiple times, and most people probably don't know what that is. Being a long-time career military intelligence officer, I lived in a skiff for many, many years. It's a secure compartment in information or intelligence facility, so it's CIF for people who aren't aware, and that's where you get to go read the most classified information, in this case for Congress, where they do that. So I have to applaud you for the things that you and the Republicans did on that day to take a stand against the just despicable kind of activity that the Democrats did, and to do that kind of stuff with a bill, particularly on an important subject like rape kits, to use it as a tool to get you out of there, that's just disgusting.
Yeah.
So from there we'll go questions if anyone has any for Ross.
I'm sorry, the thing was talking in my ear. Who were you talking with?
Campbell?
Yeah, okay, that's me. So I have a question, Ross, and it's about the court. So today there were a couple. I mean, you could look at it either way, but there were some decisions made that we could agree with. But over the past couple of weeks, the court has made some decisions where they've really legislated, where I specifically, in particular, the redefinition of the word sex in Title VII. So what can we do, or what can you do, or what can be done to rein in a court that's doing something that's not supposed to be doing?
So it's a good question, Terry, and I appreciate it. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier in terms of what's at stake as it relates to the direction of our nation and the very divergent beliefs in terms of what the left believes is the proper role of the judiciary branch and what the right believes is the proper role of the judiciary branch. The most effective and best way to rein in the court is to reelect the president and allow him to nominate 2 additional Supreme Court justices. And that will change the trajectory of our nation for at least 2, maybe 3 generations. So, you know, what could conceivably happen is that, you know, Congress could pass legislation now that says, you know, well, in this case, I think about it again. They couldn't, because the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of the U.S. Constitution. And so if they define that term to be consistent with what their interpretation of the Constitution is, there is really nothing that Congress can do. So we have got to get control of that Supreme Court. I'm very disappointed about Justice Roberts, some of the decisions that he's rendered over the last several years. He's been a major disappointment to us. If he had come our way, like I think he should have, then some of these major decisions that have gone against us, you know, we would have prevailed on. But it just shows you the absolute critical importance of making sure that we win the presidency, so that the president can nominate 2 more Supreme Court, at least 2 more, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices in his next term.
Hello?
Yes. Are you back? Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Can I make a question?
Sure. Is everybody else on the phone with us? I'm trying to figure out if we've got everybody.
Pam Taylor is still here.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
Here.
I'm here. I'll certainly answer.
Okay.
Stacy Fowler's still here.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my question is the following. We have seen the transformation of the Democrat Party to very radical left, who is attempting who is working against our Constitution. And my question is how the Republican Party or the congressmen, the people in charge, can make a stand against that, because now they are working with these people, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, that are promoting anarchy, racism, and it's very strong thing, sending a very bad message to everybody.
Yeah.
How can you stand against that?
How can we stand against that? Well, the short answer is this election we have to win. That's the short answer in the short term. In the long term, we have to continue advocating for policies on a state level and a national level that wrestle control of our educational system back from the left. The position that we're in right now, with the new thought of this generation and with the disdain for American values and the openness, the susceptibility of individuals to even socialism, is an absolute failure of our educational process, educational system, and that's our fault as a whole. We have to assume some responsibility for that. We have educated a generation, maybe 2, of students who have no concept of the fundamental founding principles of our nation. And so the short answer is we win this election cycle. We work really hard. We continue to vocally advocate for why freedom, free enterprise is a good thing to younger people. I think that freedom is always a new idea. I think fundamentally people want freedom. But we have, from the right, we have to do a better job of getting that message out, certainly to the younger generation. But part of that is going to be wresting control of education back from the left.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have another question from Ms. Kathy Brown here.
Yes, Ross, your opponent in the primary has had some television commercials. Are we going to be able to see some commercials from you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so there is a possibility we'll have some commercials on here. We've taken the approach that without getting into too much of the strategy from behind the scenes, we've taken an approach that we're going to focus on social media, and we're going to focus on mail, which you will begin to see. Our name ID is about 75 to 80% among the Republican Party in the district, and so it is incumbent on my opponent to get his name ID up there. He does have a few commercials on Fox, but I don't believe that is anywhere sufficient necessary to saturate the district to the point where he can prevail, to where he can overcome the name ID that we have. And so you have, as you probably know from being around politics, you have limited resources, especially in this cycle because of COVID-19. Everybody's resources are limited. My opponent has decided to be on TV and not to do any social media. And apparently he's not decided to do any mail yet. I don't know if he will. We've already started mail to absentee mail request voters. And as I said, we've been doing really, really heavy campaign social media. So we do have a commercial in the can, so to speak. And so there is a chance that we will begin to run those. But right now, we don't feel like we're in a position to need to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions?
Ross, actually, this is Tom Gatens, Ross. I should call you Congressman because you deserve the honor.
No, man. Nope.
I know,
good.
brother. But in all seriousness, the bill's going to be brought up, and we talked about this before, and how important it is to redirect resources, particularly pharmaceutical resources, from China back to the United States and manufacturing and development. Mm-hmm. The one thing I just want to encourage, and it's more of a statement, and I just hope you push it this way, avoid unintended consequences of short-term deadlines that may not be met and cause more difficulties, to make sure we do it the right way, I guess is the way of saying it. And I know you've been thinking a lot about this. I just want to encourage you and your fellow members to focus on making sure we do it right, because we didn't get here overnight, but we sure got here. I just want to ask if you've been active in any of that as of yet.
Yeah, actually, we have filed a number of bills and co-sponsored a number of bills that relate to the issues that we're dealing with, or actually have finally come to the realization that we have to deal with as it relates to China. So we have recently filed a bill that would authorize the president to begin taking steps necessary to recoup some of the losses from China, whatever that looks like. Probably a multifaceted approach. I've co-sponsored bills that would allow private causes of action by American citizens to sue China for damages suffered as a result of COVID-19. We have filed a number of other bills relating to supply chains. That issue is a very complicated issue that, as a conference, we're right now discussing and deciding whether it's a matter of incentives to bring those supply chains and those manufacturing of those critical items back to the United States, or whether it might take something more than just incentives to do that. So we have to also address the theft of intellectual property. The impact that China's strategic efforts to make inroads into our university system over the last couple of decades. And so we filed legislation that would make more transparent the requirements for Chinese companies that are public companies, so that we can prevent some of those types of things from happening. We're preventing exchanges of money to American professors in excess of $25,000 to prevent the transfer of information and knowledge from our universities to China. So it's a multifaceted issue. I understand what you're saying. You're right. It can't be something that's a knee-jerk reaction. But I think we definitely, while the iron is hot, so to speak, and the American people understand the importance of acting, we've got to do something pretty quickly.
Absolutely. By the way, Ross, that's why I asked you the question, because I knew you would have all the details. I mean, you're such a professional up there, and we just want to thank you for your service.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you, brother. Okay.
At this time, we'll close the question and answers. We don't have any other in the queue, and I just want to say, Ross, appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. I know this has been an effort in the making since at least March, where we first invited you, and then as the situation prevailed over the last 4 months or so, we're finally able to get you. So again, thanks for joining us. I appreciate all you're doing for us, representing us in Washington and Congressional District 15, and we'll be in touch. And again, thanks very much.
It's my pleasure, Jim. It was good to talk with everybody, and look forward to seeing everybody in person real soon. Take care. God bless.
God bless. Be safe.